You are listening to Veggie Doctor Radio, and this is episode number 255. Welcome to Veggie Doctor Radio. I am your host, Dr. Yami, board-certified pediatrician, certified lifestyle medicine physician, certified health and wellness coach, author, speaker, mother, wife, and human being. I passionately believe in the power of diet, habits, and mindset in sparking and sustaining well-being and joy in our lives. This podcast combines expert interviews and thoughtful monologues to explore plant-based nutrition, lifestyle medicine, parenting, mindset, and other exciting and fun topics. I hope that these episodes inspire you, uplift you, and equip you with the knowledge and tools to live your best life. Are you ready to get started? Let's do it. Hey veggie lovers, welcome back to Veggie Doctor Radio. I have a fantastic episode for you today with Chef Bai. It is really incredible, her story, and I hope that you will get something out of it, especially if you're someone that suffers from endometriosis or menstrual pain. I think this is a fantastic episode. Before I tell you more about her, please remember that the information on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not meant to replace careful evaluation and treatment by a healthcare professional. So if you have concerns about you, your child, anybody in your family member, their eating, nutrition, growth, please consult a healthcare professional. So Bailey Ruskus, also known as Chef Bai, is a seasoned chef, holistic nutrition and health coach. She is classically trained at Le Cordon Bleu in San Francisco. She uses her culinary experience to create rich flavors with clean, nourishing ingredients. She is an advocate for people with chronic health ailments, animal welfare, and the environment. Her own plant-based journey started with her desire to heal her chronic pain from an 18-year battle with endometriosis after exhausting all other options. She furthered her studies with a certification in plant-based nutrition from T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies and is a certified health coach from Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Bailey now hosts virtual corporate wellness classes around the globe, develops recipes for brands, and works one-on-one with individuals and families looking to heal through food. She also has a podcast called The Plant Remedy, and she released her first cookbook with over 70 recipes to kickstart your plant-based journey. It's called Cook, Heal, Go Vegan, and it became a #1 Amazon bestseller in 2021. She lives in San Diego, California with her husband, Steve, and their pup, Coconut. So in this episode, we talk about her vegan plant-based journey, her history with endometriosis, and all the things that she went to, how she talks about period pain and helps clients through that, why she believes that people should consider breaking up with dairy, why she became a chef and what it was like training at Le Cordon Bleu, and what made her transition to plant-based cooking after being traditionally trained, and how that was. Was it difficult? Her journey of going from being a classically trained chef in a male-dominated environment to being a plant-based chef. We also talk a little bit about diet culture, and we talk about all the things that she wishes people knew. It's a fantastic episode. It's a plantastic episode. So I hope that you'll love it. Thank you for being here, veggie lovers. I appreciate you so much. And now let us welcome Chef Bai. Chef Bai, Bailey Ruskus, welcome to Veggie Doctor Radio.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I'm so excited.
Well, before we get started, for those people that are watching on YouTube, you need to show them all the beverages that you have prepared for our interview. So what do you have right now?
Okay, so I have my chai. I cycle sync my caffeine or no caffeine. So I'm in my luteal phase right now. So I drink chai during my luteal phase because it has all the anti-inflammatory and it just is so nourishing. And I made this with homemade almond milk. So it's just I have an instant chai dry mix on my blog. So yeah, I make it in 3 minutes. So it's awesome. And then I have just a pre-made, which is really rare for me. I usually make my own smoothies, but I had no time this morning. So this is just a pineapple passion fruit smoothie. And then I have my water with my Stanley cup. A really big water. I try to fill this up 4 to 5 times a day. It's like my biggest goal right now is to just get as much hydration as possible. So yeah, I'm 3 beverages is honestly like a low number for me. I'm usually like cycling between 5. So yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a water person. So I have this really big
Love it.
hydro flask. It's like 40 ounces. But
I love it.
Okay. So we're ready to go then. We've got the beverages. We're well
locked
hydrated.
And loaded. Yeah, we're ready for anything.
All right. Well, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your vegan plant-based journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Man, it's such a journey. I mean, as it always is for everyone, I feel like, especially growing up in the United States, like most people I'd say aren't born vegan. It's like very much the opposite. We find this lifestyle through trial and error, through sickness, through learning about things. But for me, it was really like my journey with endometriosis that brought me here. And just having chronic pain for 16 years and just trying absolutely everything, being totally ignored by all my doctors, having no one to turn to. And so I pretty much just turned to myself, and I went plant-based as an experiment. My husband went plant-based with me. And we were like, okay, 30 days, let's see what happens. He's like, I'll give up anything for you to feel better. You know, I was going to the emergency room every month. I was having surgeries that were going wrong. It was just like I was on and off of pills and hormone replacements and, you know, Percocet. And it was just like, you know, I was in my mid-20s. It was a lot for that age. So, I mean, for any age, really. And so we went vegan for 30 days, and my whole life changed. Like, I had energy. I didn't have like such shooting pains in my ovaries like I would normally have. My back pain was starting to go away. My acne was starting to go away. My anxiety, like there's all these like little sub symptoms that I was having that was all related that you don't really realize at the time. And on his side of things, he's a surfer. He's 6'4". He grew up in Chicago in the standard American lifestyle too, like eating deep dish pizzas and Salisbury steaks and all that stuff. And he's had more energy than ever. His acne started to go away that he had since he was a kid. His body odor changed. He was recovering faster from surfing and exercising, which he does a ton of. And so after 30 days, we were like, wow, I think we're on to something here. And then 30 days turned to 6 months. And within 6 months, I was able to get off all my prescriptions, like everything, which I had been on since I was 11. So that was like a really big deal for me. And yeah, I just decided to change my business to be vegan at that point. And that's kind of like where it all took off.
Wow, completely, absolutely life-changing. And I love how you mentioned that there were other things you weren't even like, I'm doing this for anxiety. I'm doing this for this. I'm doing this mainly because I'm suffering from this pain. But then you had all of the bonus side effects, positive side effects, right? Things that were related to the hormonal dysregulation that was happening in your body. How did you learn about a plant-based diet? What even triggered it?
I mean, this sounds cliche, but like I watched What the Health. And like everyone, I mean, I watched What the Health, and I was living in a really unhealthy roommate situation at the time. Steve and I actually, I think, watched it together. Had been dating for like 2 weeks. You know, it was like very early on. And then we kind of just like, that kind of just like got like put on the back burner in my brain. But then I just started doing more and more research, because that was a time where I think you get to a point, you could call it rock bottom. You could call it just like everything kind of getting stacked up and you just feel like you're getting pushed and squeezed into a wall. But that's just kind of how I felt like with the medical system. Like I had just been tossed around for so long, seen so many specialists, like the IUD almost killed me. I had to like get it surgically removed. I was like internally bleeding from it, you know, like I had all of these things happen in a very short amount of time. And my doctors just kept being like, well, here's another birth control you can try. Or, oh, that IUD didn't work. Like, let's just put in another one. And there was just like no actual real solutions, because, you know, I was experiencing extreme symptoms from birth control too, because I had been on it since I was 11. And at this point I was 25, 26. And so I was experiencing like extreme mood swings, extreme weight loss and weight gain, like cystic acne, depressive thoughts, like suicidal thoughts, all things that are just not me, you know, like I've never had like my family doesn't have history with depression. Like I'm in general like a happy person. And so it just wasn't me, and it was all just kind of happening. And I looked at my doctor, who was supposed to be the best specialist for endometriosis. And I air quotes that because it's not like I'm saying that she's not, but from my experience, it just like wasn't, wasn't good medical care. And I asked her, and I was like, diet has to have something to do with this. And she looked me in the eyes and said, it has absolutely nothing to do with what you're going through. And I just like knew deep down that that was wrong. And so I just made it my mission to figure it out. And I just did tons of research. I, reached out to like everyone that I knew. I was online. I was just going crazy, looking at research, looking at estrogen, looking at dairy, looking at all the things. And I think eventually my husband was like, you can only research so much, like you need to just try. And for me as a French trained chef, and my whole business revolved around cooking meat and dairy. So like, I was like, I don't really understand how I'm going to do this. This feels like a last resort for me. And it seemed really extreme to me at the time, but I did it mainly because my husband was like, I'm going to do it with you, because I was addicted to cheese for sure. And it was like that support that really, I think, helped me get from A to B.
Yeah, addicted to cheese and immersed in cheese, constantly surrounded by cheese. If you're a French
culture.
cook, I mean, like literally, that was like super hard. But wow, what a wonderful support and advocate he was for you, that he was like, let's do this. You're in so much pain. I want to go back to the situation with the medical community though, because I wonder, it's so hard because I think physicians are definitely biased because we're humans, right? So we have our own biases. But I wonder if the doctor felt like saying diet has nothing to do with it would actually make you feel better. Like, no, you're not doing anything wrong. This is just the way your body's built. This is just the way it is. We're doing the best we can. It's so hard sometimes because I feel like we know that physicians in particular, one of the reasons that they don't recommend certain lifestyle changes is because they pre-decide ahead of time that it's going to be too hard for a patient, or they're not going to be able to do it anyway. So I don't want to put this big burden on this patient and tell them, oh yeah, you need to overhaul your diet. Have you reflected upon that since that time of like what you think might be going on in the heads of some of these medical providers?
Yeah, I think about it all the time, actually, because, now I do health coaching and food coaching with clients. A lot of them who come to me have endometriosis, which makes sense because I've been through it, and I've thought about it a lot. Like my best friend is a doctor. Like, it's not like I think inherently doctors are bad. I think that's like a really dangerous rhetoric that does go around the wellness space. But I just think that the system is not designed for the best patient care. And, when was sitting in those offices, like there were so many people waiting, and there's only a couple doctors for the office. So they have a very short window of the time that they can spend with you. And so inherently, I find that things just fall through the cracks. Like for me, with this specific doctor, with my surgery, there were a ton of complications, like $25,000 worth of complications that I didn't even realize happened until I got the bill from my insurance. And for me, that was and my recovery from a surgery, she's like, you should be able to go to work in 4 days. I couldn't work for 2 months after my last surgery. And then I went to her and I was like, hey, what happened? And she just kind of brushed it off. Oh yeah, there were some complications. And I still to this day have no idea what happened in there. And I think for me, it's just that like, I think it's just that things are falling through the cracks, like she's a human being. I'm sure she's just super bombarded and overwhelmed. And at the same time, like there's just not a lot of research that goes into endometriosis. Like the amount of stories that I've heard from other women and people who experience periods about just kind of like the gaslighting that happens, or just like painful periods are normal. Here's a birth control, just moving on to the next thing, it's just kind of like, but there's so much more to this than just a painful period. There's so much more to this than just like giving me birth control. And I think that is like why I'm so passionate about talking about endometriosis, because on average it takes 10 years for someone to get diagnosed. And a lot of that is just because the doctor just wants to kind of brush it off as painful periods. And I think there's some disconnect that's happening where it's like, no, this is affecting 1 in 10. 1 in 10, and that is just people who are lucky enough to get diagnosed. I'm sure it's much more than that. So I have a lot of compassion for MDs because they're working in a system that is fighting against actual patient care, and that in itself is just rough. Like, the whole system is just, I mean, so flawed. And I now know through my podcast and through the work that I'm doing, like, I know so many doctors who like get it on the level that I just like always wanted to find a doctor who got it. But unfortunately for most people who are just going through their standard insurance or just going to their standard primary care doctor, they just don't get it, especially when it comes to endo. So it can be just super frustrating. And you know, it's hard when you're going through it not to be mad at your doctor and to really see like the whole system as the problem and not the individual.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I can hear the frustration, and it's just like so many years of pain and frustration and confusion and desperation. So, I mean, that's just really tough. You mentioned that having period pain has been overly normalized. So can we talk about that? Can we talk about what people think is normal and what people have no clue could be the possibilities when it comes to diet and lifestyle changes for period pain?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a loaded question, especially when you're looking at like people of different classes, ethnicities. Like, it can vary so much. And I think there is just a lot of just people that don't believe women, like in general. Like, when women are in pain, like, unfortunately, it seems to be a very standard practice to just be like, it's in your head, or you're being dramatic, or you're a hypochondriac. Oh my God, the amount of women or people with periods that have come to me and said, my doctor called me a hypochondriac and it took 8 years for me to like press to finally get diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis. Like, blows my mind. And it's not just that, it's like PMDD and PCOS and fibroids. And there's so much going on. And when we're really looking at like our worlds and how many chemicals are in our world, how many chemicals are in our food, the amount of estrogen that's in the dairy that we're consuming, it's like, of course women are struggling. Like, of course our bodies are like responding to this environment of toxicity with something around our menstrual cycles, because I love in Chinese medicine, they really look at your menstrual cycle as like your main marker for your health. So like, how your menstrual cycle is doing is like your center of gravity, and like, let's work on that, and like everything else will kind of like fall into place. And so, yeah, I mean, it is just common practice to kind of brush it under the rug. And like, for me, you know, I got my period when I was 11, which is really young. And at least at the time, like, it was the 90s. And my mom was just like, honey, this is just how it is, you know? I had super painful periods. My mom had super painful periods. Like, this is just what it is. Like, let's go to the doctor. What happens? I get put on birth control. Still experiencing painful periods with symptoms, like extra symptoms now. So, you know, it just feels like, and even then it was like kind of weird to talk about your period. Like, now in 2023, everybody's talking about their period, which I think is amazing, because it's like, why are we not talking about this? Like, everyone's going through this all the time. I don't remember the statistic, but how many thousands of periods you go through in your lifetime? Like, we should be talking about this. And I think that's part of the problem too, for so long, is that we didn't feel comfortable or safe talking about them. Or even like in school, like I had to miss school all the time and I constantly blamed it on other things. And that for me was just like, you know, it was weird. It put me out in a little isolated box outside of my peers because I was going through something that I just couldn't talk about. So yeah, I think that answered your question kind of.
Yeah. No, I agree that I think that we should be talking about it more. And I think that we should be exposing men to it more too. I have two sons, And my husband he doesn't want to hear anything about it. And I do sometimes struggle. I had my tubes tied, and that was a huge mistake. And after that, I had a lot of post-tubal ligation pain syndrome, which is a thing that I didn't know about before I got my tubes tied. But anyway, that's another story. So I, like struggling with that and just being more open with it, I think has been really important, because I want my sons to grow up feeling like they can support other people in their lives that are going through this, instead of it being like this secretive thing that you have to suffer in silence, So,
totally. Yeah. My husband's like, I never thought that I would say the word uterus so much in my life. And even he knows now. He's like, yesterday we were hanging out and he's like, wait, you're in your luteal phase now, right? And he was like kind of planning his week around like what I'm going to need and like all the things. And I was like, God, I love you. Like, you're just so tuned in. But he's been there with me through the trenches. He was there with me post-op on that last surgery. He was there with me when I was yelling at my doctor at one point when they were trying to convince me to put in another IUD immediately after they had removed the last one that caused internal bleeding. And he was like holding me back, so like he's been there with me through all of this craziness. And so periods to him are just like the easy part. They're like, oh, this is no big deal. So when my girlfriends come over, they all know that this is like a safe space to talk about their periods, to talk about whatever. Because my husband is just like on team women and he's about it. So
oh yeah, my gosh, I love it. He should teach classes. Can we hire him to teach classes to all the rest of the husbands and partners? I love that.
I know. We'll petition him to do a class for men and to be more supportive around it, because it's true, like we need support, not to be like put in a corner and to be like, oh, don't go near her this week. It's like, actually, we could really use a hug and like some hot chocolate,
Exactly. Yes. Bring on the hot chocolate. So when clients come to you and they're experiencing these symptoms, you say you have a lot of clients that have endometriosis. What do you tell them about the link between period pain and their diet and lifestyle? Are a lot of them, they already are aware and they're seeking that, or are they surprised?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times people come to me as a last resort. So a lot of times people come to me with endometriosis as an issue, but they also have IBS. They also have type 2 diabetes. They're also struggling with anxiety. Like there's all these other things that are happening. And then the first thing we do an in-depth conversation about their lifestyle. And I look at it from like the whole person. So I look at how stressed you are. What's your relationship like? Are you intimate? Do you have joy in your life? Like, how much water are you drinking? How much are you sleeping? And what are you eating? And a lot of times, like, a lot of people are barely nourished, like, barely. They're just getting by. A lot of times they're only getting calories from animal foods. A lot of times they've been freaked out about just eating in general from their doctors. And so, people come to me as a last resort, which I wish people would come sooner, and I think there's like can be this beautiful link between like me and an MD, where we kind of like work together. Because for me, what I do is I help people link, how are you actually going to do this? Like you need to make these dietary changes. How are you going to do this within your lifestyle, within your budget, within the energy that you have to give, with the kids that you have, with the foods that you like, the foods that your kids don't like? If your husband's super difficult, which is like a whole other thing, husbands, can we just be less difficult? Like if your wife wants to cook a plant-based meal, just like eat it. Like, what is your problem? Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But, there's like women specifically are going through so much stress, so much scheduling, so much just, and at the end of the day, like their health just falls on the back burner, it just falls short because there's not enough time to think about it. And so for me, it's really getting them on a plan of just being nourished all day long. So maybe that doesn't look like they're perfectly vegan, or maybe that doesn't look like whatever, but it looks like them getting as much fiber, as much plant diversity as humanly possible, and doing it in a way that's super palatable. So like making sure they're drinking water, getting that smoothie in the morning, because that's usually the fastest thing, like maybe having fruit ready to go for a midday snack, like having a veggie sandwich, like really breaking it down simply, because sometimes it really is just about survival for people. And I think that, I love to overcomplicate a meal plan. Like, I'm a chef. Like, that's like where I thrive, but most people can't live in those terms and want to start really slow, really simply. And that's kind of where we get started. And then when it comes to talking about processed foods, meat and dairy, is like, we really just want to lower our estrogen intake is kind of where I like to talk about it, especially with dairy, especially with meat. And I was just reading this new study that came out where like eating red meat increases your chance of endometriosis by 53%, which is crazy. So yeah, it's all about just lowering the estrogen. And then again, with processed foods as well, we just want to like lower inflammation and just feel better. We just want to feel better. And not only that, there's a lot of plant foods that actually help absorb estrogen as well. So when you're eating a lot of plant foods, you're actually able to absorb that excess estrogen. You're actually able to balance your hormones. And like eating all that amazing organic tofu and all that stuff can just help you feel so much better. And it seems when you're first getting into it, like, is it really going to help me like that much? And the short answer is hell yeah. It's going to help a lot. So yeah, that's kind of the way I start. And then I go into lifestyle. So I look at like the cleaning products you're using, the tampons that you're using. Oh my God, conventional tampons are full of glyphosate. They're bleached white, conventional tampons are so toxic. And that was a huge wake up call for me when I started changing my tampons to either period underwear or organic tampons as like a emergency reserve in my car. My periods changed a lot just from that. So there's like a lot of tiny things that are tiny that actually make up a huge kind of reasoning for why we're feeling the way that we're feeling. And it is all about our makeup. It is all about the water that we're drinking. It's all about everything. And it can feel really overwhelming when you get started. But, if you break it down one thing at a time in the span of a year, your life is going to just look completely different. And all these things are going to be completely common practice. Like for me, I never thought that I would ever be vegan. And now I'm like the vegan poster child. Like I am so hardcore. I've written books. I'm writing another book that I just announced, which is actually called Breaking Up with Dairy. And I'm just all about it. And I never would have ever thought this would be my life. So the same goes for anyone else. Like you can do it. Like you can change for the better. And when you heal your period, I really feel like you can heal like everything else.
Yeah, because it affects your mood, going up to it, in it, after it. I mean, it's ovulation. Like a big part of our lives, like if you could feel better during that time, it helps increase your joy, your productivity, how you can serve others. And I love how you bring in that, that well-being. That well-being is so central to our lives and how we live and experience our lives. So it's perfect segue to my next question is why should people consider breaking up with dairy? It's the topic of your next book.
Oh my gosh, how much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding. I mean, okay, the first thing I really love to talk about, we just talked about a lot of the health stuff when it comes to estrogen, but like ethically, dairy is one of the most cruel industries on this planet. It is so horrific for the animals. And I think when, we're talking about our periods, when you're looking at it from just like the feminine angle, I really have started to see dairy as like a war on the feminine in general. All these dairy cows are mothers. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that. Like the disassociation is very real when it comes to like what we're eating in our food system. And even me, like you kind of forget, like, when I was in cheese culture, eating Gruyere, like you don't think about the fact that like the only reason that this cow is making milk is because it was pregnant for 9 months.
So my pediatric practice, Nourish Wellness, recently went through a location change and an expansion. We expanded about 4 times the size as far as space. We went from 2 exam rooms to 6 exam rooms, and it's been quite a change. And, we're really happy to be here. It was a huge leap. I decided to change a lot of things at once because I feel like, just rip off the Band-Aid, make it the way you want it, so that we can align our services with the quality that we're envisioning. With growth often comes complexity, but I'm so happy that we adopted TriMed EHR as our software solution for the practice. I was looking for an efficient and effective EHR that would help us maximize and leverage technology. When you're a small practice, when you're trying to be efficient, when you want to maximize the effort that you put in, you want to leverage technology. One of our goals is to be as paperless as possible, and I love that TriMed integrates forms upon check-in, so we don't have to print them and then scan them, and parents don't have to fill out things by hand. In addition, parents can complete forms in the comfort of their homes before they even get to the office. However, we know what life is like. Life gets busy. Little kids take up a lot of time. So if they don't get it done at home, they can complete it in the office on the iPad. We also love that we can send letters and completed forms to the patient portal for secure communication and easy access by patient families. But most of all, I'll never get tired of talking about their amazing customer service. Having had an EHR from a really large company previously, I can tell you that getting help was frustrating and time consuming. I didn't really feel like that other company I was working with really cared about me. I didn't really matter to them. I was just some little tiny practice. Who cares? But with TriMed, it's completely different. Not only do they help right away, they know us. When I call and I talk to them, they know who they're talking to. They know my practice. It feels like talking to a friend. I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. And not because a lot of things are going wrong, because we're super happy, but things happen, you have questions, you want to tweak something, you don't know how to do it. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out how to do it yourself, a phone call that might take 60 seconds and they can tell you how to do it. Oh my gosh, it makes such a huge difference in your life as a practice owner and as a practitioner. So like I said, we're really happy with TriMed. We're so glad we switched. And if you're looking to start your own practice or you're in the market to change EHRs, practice management systems, I really recommend that you check out TriMed. You can find them at trimedtech.com. That's TriMedtech.com.
It carries a child for 9 months. And then as soon as it has the baby's taken from it. The baby is fed a formula, which literally makes absolutely no sense to me. It's survived for like 6 weeks usually. If it's a male, it's killed for veal at 6 weeks old, which is literally killing a baby, which I find it bizarre that people are fine with that. Or if it's a female, then it's raised to be a dairy cow in isolation. So all these babies are taken from their mothers and put in isolation crates. They don't get to cuddle with other cows. And cows are very social creatures. This is very painful. This whole industry is very painful for them. Then the mother has all of this milk that then we take because we say, hey, this baby doesn't deserve this mom's milk. It's for us. We own that milk because we own this cow, so we own that milk. And it's so rough because, I made this video in December of 2021, and it was about this. And it was about how I really feel like dairy is a war on the feminine, and the Dairy Farmers Association of America got a hold of this video, and I started to receive death threats from the dairy industry. From dairy farmers, they started to stitch my video. They were showing things like, oh, look at how happy my cow is. My cow's rubbing against the machine like it wants to get milked. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, because its udders are engorged because you took its baby who's supposed to be drinking the milk. So yeah, it knows that the machine makes it feel relief. And so it's asking you to hook it up to the machine because that's its only option, not because it just loves the machine so much, because you have put it in this situation. So the whole industry is just so incredibly toxic. oh man, it just gives me like such an ick. It makes me feel just so gross when I think about it. And not only that, I was a vegetarian for a long time. These cows have, 5, 6, 7 pregnancies. Eventually they collapse of exhaustion, and then they're sent off to slaughter. Sometimes they die before they're slaughtered because they're so exhausted, and those cows get put into dog meat, which is like, or kibble or whatever. So it's just so horrific. The whole industry is so awful. And if you're talking about like just solely I really believe in the energetics of food. If you're talking about the energetics of food, the energy of that is not good. It's not what we need to heal. It's not what we need to progress as a species. It's not what we need. It's not a compassionate way to eat at all. And I believe that with everything that I have. And yeah, so there's just so many better options at this point. So when you look at it from a health perspective, it is completely unnecessary. It actually makes our hormones worse. Like I had horrible acne for my whole life, and I never thought about the connection of dairy and acne, but it's like so correlated and so connected. And yeah, so that's my opinion on dairy. I think that it's just like an ethical crisis that's happening within the dairy industry. And if you think about it, like dairy, like milking a cow was originally like a thing out of necessity for farmers or for people living in rural areas that didn't have access to things, or that was like in the 1800s. Like this is 2023. So like everything is different now. We have such better access to other things. And when you really also start to look at the lobbying that happens within the dairy industry, like the meat and dairy industry has lobbied over $200 million against climate change reform. They also have the Dairy Checkoff program, which is essentially a government-funded program that is making sure that small kids get advertisements to dairy, that is making sure that small kids are drinking milk in their school lunches. And it just goes on and on and on. The Dairy Checkoff program is also a funded science-based research facility that is proving to people that dairy is good for you, right? But it's biased science, so you can't trust it, because they're essentially paying these scientists to say, hey, make sure at the end of the study, it says that you need to drink more dairy for X, Y, and Z. So like a good example is the dairy for strong bones. It actually has been proven that if you drink a lot of dairy, your risk for osteoporosis is much, much, much higher. So yeah, I could talk about this all day, but I think I'll probably stop there.
Well, that's why you've written a book on it, right?
Writing the book, yeah.
There will be more. And so my family, and I'm actually leaving for Panama in just a couple of days. I'm originally Panamanian from Panama, and my family in Panama are dairy farmers. So I grew up with this, seeing it. And I remember as a young child just being out there on the farm, and we do have more of what you would call a traditional farm that you would picture in your head, right? Like it is the rolling, beautiful hills, and the babies get to stay with their moms for a year, so they don't get taken away right away. But I remember as a young child being like, this is really weird. Like basically we just take these cows and we take their milk and we drink their milk because we want it, but then it's the baby's milk. I was really confused, but I loved milk. And also milk was always promoted as essential as I was growing up, right? So you need milk.
Yes.
Like basically bad things happen if you don't drink milk. And I was told by my doctor, and when I became a doctor, I learned the same thing. Kids need milk, even teens need even more milk. Menopausal women need even more milk. Everybody needs so much milk.
That is the dairy checkoff program.
Yeah. and it was like one of those things like, well, I guess this is just something we have to do. It seems really weird that we're doing this. And I remember thinking as a kid, I didn't know the word exploitation, but I understood the concept of exploitation. Like basically we're using these living, beautiful creatures as our product, as our machines to supply this milk. But then my brain with the cognitive dissonance was like, well, we need it, so I guess there's no other way. That's just the way we have to do it.
Right.
So it wasn't until I became an adult and encountered and did my own experiment for 30 days that I discovered you actually don't need it and you're better off without it. And then that's when my whole paradigm shattered, right? So I think that when we start with this assumption, which is very prevalent, that milk is necessary, that dairy is necessary, it is an essential health food, it changes all of the questions we ask after that. And I think that's why science in general can be biased, because we start with assumptions and our questions only come from those assumptions and beliefs that we have. But if we change the paradigm, be like, do we even need dairy? And change it completely to the opposite of like, dairy is actually harming us, then we're looking at different research questions and things like that. So
yeah, especially when you look at the link to prostate cancer, breast cancer. I mean, when you start to look at these links and then you start to also pair that up with like, I mean, this is a huge basket of worms. I'm not going to go into all of it, but when you link it up with like cancer and then like the funding that goes into cancer, you link it up with all of the connections that like big pharma has with big agriculture, and you start to look at all these links of who's getting paid, you're kind of like, whoa, this is really intense, especially when you look at the meat and dairy industry and how it's all connected to everything, how much money is involved with it. And I feel bad because a lot of times people think, well, you know, like you were talking about, like, I thought this was good for me. Like, I was just listening to what was told. A lot of people don't realize that, like, those dietary guidelines from the government and even, like, that are put in medical schools are paid for by the dairy industry. They're literally, it's like an advertisement. It's placed there. It's like, hey, we need to sell more dairy, so you guys are going to sell it for us. And I think that's what people don't really get, is the fact that it's all done on purpose, but it doesn't mean that it's good for you. And I think that's a hard reality for a lot of people to wake up to.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because a lot of us get addicted to it too. So then there's that bias. We have our own personal bias of we just want to hear that it's good for us and that we should drink it because we want to keep drinking it and eating it, you know, especially with the cheese. So let's go to your story about being a chef. So first of all, why did you become a chef to begin with? What was it like training at Le Cordon Bleu? And then how did the transition go? Because I know that whenever you were thinking about making that transition, you're like, I don't even know if this is possible. So tell me from the beginning, why did you even become a chef?
Okay, so I got my first job in a kitchen when I was 11. My mom had this friend that had a pastry kitchen. It was called a Grand Finale, and she was like, hey, you want to go work there instead of summer camp? And I was like, yeah, let's go. Because I was always like making cookies. I was filming myself when I was a young kid, like cooking. I was watching the Food Network all the time. I was just kind of obsessed with it. It was just such a good like creative outlet. I could like create something with my hands that was just delicious afterwards. I just absolutely loved it. And this was like the time, I just didn't watch a lot of TV as a kid either. I just wanted to be cooking or being outside or whatever. And so my mom already knew I was very interested in it. So then I was like, of course, like, yeah, I'm going to make money. I'm going to make cannolis. I'm going to make buttercream. And so, yeah, I got that job. I absolutely loved it. And then I ended up working in a different bakery in high school. So I essentially would go to work before high school. So I would get up at 4 a.m., go to work, help make like bagels and cream cheese, and I would like make lattes and like do all the things that would basically run this little bakery in the morning. And I loved it because I would always come to school with like a cinnamon roll or like a big stacked bagel or something. So it was like a win-win for sure. And I had like a whole social group at work. And I was also just a terrible student. So I was awful. Like I would never go to school. I was definitely like a little pothead as a teenager. I was just a super rebel. My poor parents. I was off the rails. But I look at that, and I was also a kid that was dealing with endometriosis, being on very high doses of birth control. Like I was on Yaz back in the day when Yaz was, I don't know what Yaz is now, but Yaz was super strong. Like they had put me on all the like low teenage birth controls, and they were like, okay, none of this is working. Like here's the big daddy, you know, and it just made me crazy, honestly. So I was just partying all the time. I couldn't all my friends were like in college or were from my job. And like, even as a sophomore in high school, I just could not relate to my peers. I also grew up in like a very white, wealthy neighborhood outside of Boulder, Colorado. My parents were not wealthy, so I just didn't fit in. You know, people were getting like Porsches for their Sweet 16 and like BMWs. And my dad was like, you better like work for that and save your money because I'm not buying you a car. Like, we don't live over there. We live over here. So, you know, don't even think about it. So I didn't fit in. I graduated with a 1.7 GPA. Like, I barely made it, you know, like, it's so insane. So I went to culinary school because culinary school will accept anyone. They'll take everybody's money because it's super expensive. The dropout rate is over 70%. Wow. And they're like, yeah, essentially like your application is coming and seeing if you make it through because it's intense. You know, you're essentially being guided by these really intense chefs who are very sexist. And like, I look back at that whole time and I'm just like, oh man, you know, as a young woman, it was a really intense place for me to be in, but I was an intense person at the time. So I essentially went from high school in Boulder, Colorado. I moved to San Francisco when I was 18, and then I threw myself into Le Cordon Bleu Culinary School. And I was dedicated. I was living at the top of California on Powell Street when I first moved there, which is like the top of the city, like right behind Union Square. And I remember having my like 70-pound knife bag, just like hiking it up and down those hills. Sometimes I'd miss the bus, so I'd literally have to walk 5 miles to school, but I was dedicated. I made it happen. And I got through culinary school. I mean, French culinary school is the most opposite thing that you could ever think of to vegan. Like, it's literally just, you know, I had butcher classes, which I was very proud that I was the top in my class. I went into competitions on how quickly I could butcher a pig or half of a lamb or, you know, cut apart a chicken, which I think about that now and I'm just like, oh my God, the disassociation with all of that is so, you know, it's like a very like male boys club that I was really just trying to fit into. And yeah, I mean, everything was cooked in pork belly. It was essentially like an episode of Chopped every day. You know, you're trying to cook quickly, trying to cook as best as you can. Your chefs would like try your food, and if they didn't like it or they thought it was undersalted or something, they would spit it out on the floor in front of you and then make you clean it up. Super insane. So when people leave mean comments on Instagram, I'm like, you guys don't even know. You can't hurt me at this point, you know? Oh my goodness. So yeah, it was really intense, but that intense experience made me realize I did not want to pursue a career in a restaurant because I was like, this is toxic. This is such a toxic environment. Like, the amount of sexism that there was, the amount of just unhealthy behaviors, addiction, you know, like alcohol abuse. It was just not good. And so I broke down to one of my advisors actually this one day. And I was actually staging at a restaurant, which I was experiencing sexual harassment on the line there from the line cooks. And I was like, you know, I don't think I can do this. Like, I took out $100,000 in loans to be here, and I don't know how I can live like this. You know, I don't know how I can work these 16-hour days in a very unsupportive environment and like miss all the big events in my family's life because I'm here working this job and getting paid, you know, $12 an hour and being very underappreciated. And so that's when that advisor was like, hey, you should be a private chef. Like, you would be really good at that. You're personable. She's like, you're kind of cute. Like, you've got this whole thing going on. Like, I think you could be like your own brand, you know? And she said that to me when I was 19. And I was like, okay, like, I think that will work. And so that's when she got me connected with my first client. And, you know, the first day working for them was a total disaster. I like set a piece of salmon on fire. I got like, I had this blender that like exploded because I didn't like lock the top in. And so they have big vaulted ceilings and like the sauce got on the ceiling somehow. When they came home basically ready for dinner, there was no dinner ready for them. But they were so nice. They like sent me home in a black car and like had a gift for me, and we're like, we'll just get takeout. It's fine. Like, don't worry. And so like that was a level of hospitality that I hadn't experienced yet, because working in that chef culture was just so much more intense. And that's pretty much where my private chef career just took off. I was like, this just feels better. This feels so supportive. I'm going to figure this out. And so I started private chefing. I was working for really big executives, professional athletes. Like I was just really threw myself in that culture. And then I started doing retreats, and yeah, it was amazing. I worked in restaurants still, like on and off if I needed some extra money. And yeah, that's kind of how my whole career kind of took off. It was just from a little bit of desperation and just, winging it basically. And I'm still a private chef now. I have a couple of clients that I work for, a couple of VIP clients, and every once in a while I'll get like a request from a professional athlete or something like that, and I'll do that. So yeah, that's kind of how my whole career took off. And then when it came to going vegan, I remember I had been vegan for 6 months, and I was in a client's kitchen and I was gutting a fish, listening to a James Aspey speech. And I'm listening to this speech from James Aspey about just like animals and like this whole thing. I'm literally gutting a fish at this moment, and I'm crying over this fish. Like my tears are hitting the fish. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like I am not aligned officially. Like what's happening here is not happening here. And like I need this to all be aligned. So I basically sat my clients down, all of them, and I was like, hey, like I can't cook meat and dairy anymore. I know this is a really big transition for you guys, but I can't do it. Like I'm not in it. And so I lost pretty much all my clients except for one. And I lost a lot of followers online. I got a lot of hate online, but I just like knew I had to be consistent ethically, like with what was going on in my heart, what was going on in my business, and what was going on for me too. Like I just knew that ethically it wasn't right. It wasn't the best thing for my clients either, especially because a lot of my clients were people who were dealing with like pretty extreme health problems as well. And so yeah, but it was such a great leap. I'm so glad I made it. I mean, it was a rough start for sure, but now it's my thing and people love it, and most of my clients now are not vegan, but they love my food. So it's a win-win.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. What a big leap you had to take. That took a lot of courage and bravery, but you're right. It's so many different ways that it wasn't aligned. And you were also feeling like, is this ethical? Like I would feel like that too. Like, okay, I'm getting paid to make food for people that could be harming them. I don't know how I'd feel about that, So it was probably difficult, but now it seems like you're glad you did it. So that's good. And it's brought you other rewards and treasures.
It has more purpose, it's all about, more purpose and more than just a means to an end. It's not just like pushing out pretty plates one after another, not thinking about the ramifications or the ripple effect that plate has. It's really thinking about that as like a tool to enact change. So yeah, it's just a different mindset.
Wow. What a journey. Well, I want to switch gears and talk about a topic that's really important to me and something that I'm really passionate about, and that's diet culture. So I would love to know your thoughts. I know this is probably this is a whole podcast episode, but let's try to keep it short, okay?
Okay. So, I know I'm a talker.
All right. What do you think about diet culture, especially in the plant-based community, and how it can influence our body image, but also how it influences our conversation around women's health issues?
Whew. That's a big question.
It is a big one. You have 30 seconds. I was joking.
Should we do a part two? It's so insane because I think, when I first hear that question, what comes up is I had a friend the other day be like, wow, you look so healthy for a vegan. Like most vegans I know are super, super skinny and like almost seem like they have an eating disorder. And that comment, like she kind of said it just so nonchalant, but it really just like stuck with me because, I think for a long time before there was a lot of like conversation and research about plant-based and how it's actually, you can eat in abundance and how it's this beautiful, amazing thing for health and nourishment. I do feel like sometimes people used the lifestyle to restrict. right? And to restrict their eating and to almost punish themselves. And I think it's this big cultural shift that needs to happen into thinking, no, I'm not vegan because I'm restricting. It's actually the opposite. I was restricting the other way because I was getting most of my calories from, animal protein, which is so calorie dense. And now I have all this room to eat all these other things. And so it's this really intense kind of like shift that we need to switch in thinking about eating with abundance versus eating from scarcity, eating from lack, eating from fear, eating from self-hatred. I think it's a lot of times like diet culture has taught us to hate ourselves. And I have those feelings. I have extreme body dysmorphia from having endometriosis, from having surgeries, from my body changing so much. I don't even know what my body really looks like. I think my husband thinks I'm absolutely insane, but it's just, he's like, what are you talking about? But I see myself totally different than he does, but that is diet culture. Diet culture has taught us to take up as little space as possible. It has taught us to hate ourselves. It has taught us that weight is the only measure of health. And I think that rhetoric is just, I know it's so damaging. It's so damaging to how we look at health, to how we look at food, to how we look at our calorie intake. Everyone's so freaking concerned with their calories or their macros. It's like, no, I'm looking at micronutrients and how many you can eat in one day, how much food can you eat that's going to make you feel amazing. It's all about eating in abundance. And I think for me, that was a huge shift that I had to make was it's not about restricting, it's about abundance and eating in abundance. And even now, I just got a comment yesterday that was hey, did going vegan help you lose weight? And what I really think the answer is going plant-based and eating healthy and feeling vibrant helped me get to the weight that was safe for my body. Mm-hmm. So I actually gained weight when I went plant-based. I look back at pictures of me from when I was, pre-plant-based days, and I was so skinny. I was so skinny, and I didn't even realize how skinny I was. And now I've got more meat on my bones. I'm just healthier. I've got more vibrancy in my face. And that's just because I don't restrict myself. I eat as much as I want to. I eat until I'm full. When I'm hungry, I am grabbing for snacks. I am not restricting. And I think a lot of that is me actively putting diet culture away. I'm actively being this does not have any place in my brain anymore. I'm going to love and nourish my body. And yeah, sometimes I have a hard time with the fact that I'm 2 sizes bigger than I used to be or whatever, but that's secondary. How I feel is always, first. And that in itself, I think, can be really hard for people to think about eating in abundance because we're taught the opposite. My grandmother, she would never finish her dinner, ever. She would eat like a little bird, and that is diet culture in her brain. And she would always say, no, women are never supposed to finish their meal, is what she would say to me. And I would be like, okay, okay, that's super weird, but okay, I'm going to eat, So
you do you, Grandma.
I know, but it's ingrained from their culture. She was born in the 1920s. So yeah, I think I answered most of your question, but yeah, it's just totally shifting the way that we think about things. And diet culture has such a big effect on everything. It has an effect on our hormones. When we're restricting, we're not giving our bodies what they need to thrive. And what the reality is that our bodies go through so much every month. We need so many nutrients to keep this train moving, from ovulation to our luteal phase to our menstrual phase. So much is happening. We need so much energy to thrive, and to think of it as putting gas in your car. It sounds so silly and cliche, but it's so real that you need that gas to keep going. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. It's so complicated and there's so many emotions involved, but yeah. I agree. That's why I try to bring it back to that well-being. How can we make choices that help us feel better and not choices to just change our appearance, because sometimes the choices we make to change our appearance are actually not things that increase our well-being. It might actually decrease our well-being and our mental health.
Right.
So it really is about that long game of what can we do that's sustainable, that feels good, that helps us live that long, healthy, vibrant life and spread joy and serve others. So yeah, lots of great thoughts there. Well, what do you wish more people knew?
I mean, you are in so much more control than you think you are. You know, I think a lot of times we're taught that we have to seek all this outside help. We have to take all these pills, or we have to do all these external things. But like a lot of the answers we already know, and we have so much more control over our health than we are led to believe. And I wish more people knew that, because I really believe that like healed women can really heal the world. And I think it's really hard as women to worry about all these big problems that we have in the world because we don't feel good, because we are tired, we're sick, we're in pain, you know, we're dealing with all of these things. And I just wish that we all kind of collectively realize that we have more of a choice in the matter. And with that choice, I think would come a very different just future for all of us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And just learning to tune into that intuition too is
Totally.
what I hear you saying is we don't always have to be seeking that external validation or external rules. You know, we can go inside and feel it out, what the truth is for each one of us individually.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we already know so much. Like, women are powerful creatures, and I think that's what the man is very scared of. And not like men, but like, you know, the man is very scared of women, because we are a force to be reckoned with for sure.
I agree with that. Well, do you have a morning routine? And if so, if you can share it with us.
Yeah, I mean, my morning routine always starts with a cuddle. Like, I'm a cuddler for sure. Like that, I leave at least 20 minutes in the morning to like snuggle with my dog, snuggle with my husband if he's here, if he's not surfing. I just like love it. My dogs love it. Like, it's all part of everyone's routine. Like, we're all just there. We're like awake. I'm like petting them. It's just like that moment of joy that I get first thing in the morning. Like, I'm just not a alarm goes off and hop right out of bed kind of girl. Like, I need that moment of integration, being awake, like starting the day off with love. So I love that's like the best part of my day for sure. And then I drink one of these guys. So I drink 30 ounces of water. And then what else? I do my skincare. I try to get like 5 minutes of sun on my face at least. I let my skincare sit for at least 5 to 10 minutes before I put my makeup on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. Like, I just always want water. I get something healthy in my stomach. So if that's like a handful of, I love pineapple. So a handful of pineapple, or like a fruit bowl, or a quick smoothie or something. And then once I kind of do all of that, then I'll have caffeine. Because I've noticed that sometimes when I'm really busy or I have a lot going on, I will spend my morning that I have like cuddling in the morning. It's like my biggest weakness, honestly. And then I have like 5 minutes to do everything else. And so then I'll go straight for the caffeine sometimes. And I've noticed that that does not make me feel good for the rest of the day. So that rest of that routine is really important to like fuel me and get me out. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Every single day I pretty much do that. And I have, you know, as we talked about, all my beverages that like kind of like get me started.
You're a well-hydrated woman.
I'm trying. It's hard out here.
I love your cuddle routine. I need to integrate that. I'm definitely a jump out of bed, get started, ready to go in the morning. But on Sunday is my day. I allow myself to sleep in, and I definitely cuddle a little bit more with my puppy, with my dog, and take it slower. It'd be nice to do that every morning, though.
Even 5 minutes, you know, it's just like a little bit of joy and like just, I love it.
Yeah. You get that oxytocin. It just feels so good. I mean, literally, totally. Sometimes I wonder if I'm exploiting my dog because I use her. Like, I'm like, come here, I'm anxious. I'm just like hugging her. And she's like, look at me like, what's going on?
She's like knowing she's your emotional support animal.
Yes, my anxiety relief. Well, Chef Bai, you're just wonderful, fantastic.
Thank
and
you.
I want to know where listeners can connect with you. Tell us about your book that is already out, has been out. Cook,
Yes, it's been
Heal,
out.
Go Vegan. And then about your upcoming book, where can we find out more about that? Sign up to be the first to buy it. Tell us all the details on that.
Yeah, so Cook, Heal, Go Vegan's been out for almost 2 years now, which is so crazy to think about. But yeah, it's been amazing. It's published all over, and I love it. It's a great beginner's guide to going vegan, but there's a lot of great like chef developed recipes in there. Obviously, I essentially matched my classic culinary kind of techniques in with a plant-based diet, so there's just tons of flavor. It's not like a basic cookbook. There's definitely like levels to it. But if you really are trying to get that like super amazing like cuisine vibe, but also be plant-based and also like heal your body, it's definitely a good book for that. And my next book's not coming out till 2025. So we've got some time. I just announced the deal like last week, actually. So
Wow.
Yeah, we're still in the very early phases. I still need to write it. So there's that part of it. No big deal.
I sense you're going to spend a lot of time cuddling. I know how the book writing process goes. So.
Totally. So much editing. I know, it's so true. So yeah, we're still writing. We're still testing that one. But I'm really excited that that's going to be coming out. I think everyone's going to be ready for it too. It's going to be right after an election. So I think everyone's going to be kind of like looking towards, it's going to come out New Year's 2025. So I'm very excited for that. I'm going to be doing like sneak peeks on like all the stuff on it. I'm also going to be doing a lot of questions over on my Instagram, so everyone can kind of get to know, you know, the book and like put your input in, because it is breaking up with dairy. So I want to know why breaking up with dairy is very hard for you, so I can tackle that in the book. And other than that, you can find me on Instagram at chef_Bai. Same thing for TikTok. Hope TikTok stays, crossing my fingers. And yeah, I also have a course called the Period Liberation Protocol, where I talk about plant-based diet and all the things that we talked about today. That basically goes in depth. So if you're experiencing painful periods, come talk to me. It is a great course for that. And I think that's it. YouTube, like I'm just everywhere, so you can find me.
Nice. We'll put all your links. Okay, so last question before we go.
Yes.
What are your top 5 wellness hacks and habits?
Top 5 wellness hacks and habits. Okay, number 1 is water before coffee. It sounds so trivial, but like we gotta be hydrating. You know, when we wake up in the morning, we're so dehydrated, so we gotta hydrate. I would say on the reverse of that, I always try to end my day with something like hydrating and nourishing as well. So whether that be like a fruit bowl or water or tea or something like that. So that's the second one. I would say the third one is to follow your own inner compass when it comes to your body and your healing and your health. Because that wellness hack, like there's no trend or influencer or anyone that can get in the way of that, you know? And then I would also say to stop consuming refined sugar, to switch to coconut sugar, something that's just a lot less inflammatory, also more eco-friendly, which is like a big deal. And then I would say the fifth one, what is my fifth wellness hack? You know, I'm going to say to learn how to enjoy cooking, because it's such a intimate, primitive thing we can do for ourselves. Put on music, find a recipe. Like if you don't like to cook, just get yourself into it. Sometimes we just have to force ourselves into things, and it's something that is a lifelong skill, a lifelong practice that can help you connect to other people. It can help you connect to yourself. And it's awesome to learn something new. So I would say that's the last one.
I love it. Beautiful. Chef Bai, it's been such a pleasure to meet you. I hope that you come back when you're ready to promote your next book, because I definitely want to have that in-depth conversation. I'm grateful for everything that you've done and for you sharing your journey with us. And I hope that you have a very plantastic day.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Hey, veggie lover. I hope that you loved today's episode. Will you take a second and do me a huge favor? please subscribe to my podcast so that you never miss an episode. You're the reason I'm here, and I want to share it all with you. Thank you for listening, and have a plantastic day.